I want my brothers to just come home. It's not fair. The arrogant and the welfare people take away from them. First time they come down over, they said they weren't going to take them. Or the second time they came down over, they took. And I can't even see them now. I want them to come home.
Chapter 1. They just took them. An old woman's hands tremble in her lap as tears gather in the corners of her eyes. This is Betty Whittaker, 73 years old, the woman who spent her entire life cooking, cleaning, and fighting for the brother, sister, and nephew who are no longer sitting beside her. Today, the house is quiet. The chairs are empty, and the people she calls my kids have been taken away. They said they were helping them, and they couldn't live here no more. I miss them a lot. I raised them, Betty says, voice cracking. She wipes her face like she's apologizing for crying, but she keeps going, because the only thing she has left is the truth as she understands it. This video is not about gawking at a family in pain. We will share only what can be verified, and we will protect their dignity. It is not about starting hate or sending anyone to harass social workers, police, or YouTubers. It is about one woman who feels abandoned by a system that said it would protect her loved ones, and by outsiders who promised to help, then disappeared when everything fell apart. Tonight, we're going to ask hard questions. What really happened the day the state came to the Whittaker home? Why does Betty believe fame and help cost her the people she loves most? And is there any path left that leads her back to them? Chapter 2. Who Betty is. A life built around care. Long before cameras ever found the gravel road to Odd, West Virginia, there was just a small, worn-out house and a woman named Betty trying to keep it all together. The Whittakers lived in deep rural poverty in a home that struggled with basic things like running water and sanitation, surrounded by hills that kept them as isolated as they were vulnerable. Inside that isolation, Betty grew into her role. Now 73, she never married, never had children of her own. Instead, her life narrowed down to a promise she once made to her mother, that she would look after her brothers and sisters as long as she could. For decades, she kept that promise. She cooked, cleaned, and made sure Ray, her sister Lorene, and Lorene's son Timmy were fed, clothed, and under one roof. Neighbors would say simply, "She raised them." In a family where some members speak mostly in sounds and gestures, Betty became the interpreter of their world. She learned the rhythm of Ray's grunts, the signs of when Timmy was hungry or restless, the small ways to calm Lorene when confusion set in. For outsiders, their home might look chaotic. For Betty, every routine was a form of love and a way to keep her promise one more day. When the world first saw the Whittakers through an online documentary, the reaction was explosive. Millions clicked, watched, and reacted. The family became an internet story, called shocking names, and turned into a symbol of Appalachian poverty and isolation. But behind those headlines was still the same woman, stepping over the same worn threshold, making sure her brother and sister were fed before she thought about herself. That's the part people don't see when they only know the clips. For Betty, this was never content. This was her identity. Her days started and ended with checking on the boys and on Timmy, making sure doors were locked, lights were off, and everyone was where they belonged. Her entire sense of purpose was tied to the simple belief that as long as she was there, her family would not be separated. So when the knock finally came on the door, and the state decided this house and this woman were no longer enough, it wasn't just a home that was judged. It was the life's work of someone who had quietly kept a fragile family from falling apart for more than 70 years. Chapter 3. The day everything changed. Inside the removal. The day they came, the holler was quiet in that way, only back roads can be. No warning, no letter Betty could hold in her hands and show to someone. Just the sound of tires on gravel and strangers walking up the same worn path she had swept for years. They told her they needed to check them out, that it was about safety, about making sure everybody was okay. No one said, "We're going to take your family away." In Betty's memory, it starts like a visit and ends like a disappearance. They looked around the house at the floors, the bathroom, the worn-out furniture. They saw the same thing she saw every day, but to them it meant something different. To them, it was evidence. To her, it was just home. The place where she had fed Ray, guided Lorene, and watched Timmy grow up under her roof. She remembers standing there, feeling small, while people in uniforms and badges walked through her life like it was a case file. They talked in the kind of calm, official voices that never matched the storm they're bringing with them. Someone mentioned that the house wasn't suitable. Then came the moment that split her life in two. Police cars and ambulances filled the yard. Doors opened. Hands reached out. Ray, Lorene, and Timmy were led away, one by one. Timmy, confused and terrified, started screaming for his mother. The sound tore through the yard, through the trees, through Betty's chest. She could do nothing but watch, crying as the people she had promised to protect were loaded into vehicles like they were being taken to another planet. They told her they weren't arresting anyone, that this was for their own good. They said the house wasn't safe for them anymore, but somehow it was still fine for Betty and Larry to stay there alone. They didn't give her a clear answer about where her family was going or how long they would be gone. The silence around those details felt louder than the sirens. When the vehicles finally pulled away, dust hanging in the air behind them, the yard went quiet again. The same porch, the same house. But something was gone that could not be brought back by sweeping the steps or cooking another meal. Betty stood there with empty arms and a promise she no longer knew how to keep. For the state, it was a protective intervention. For Betty, it felt like they had just taken her whole reason for living and driven it straight out of the holler. Chapter 4. Promises, Donations, and a Fraud Investigation. Long before the state cars rolled into the yard, other vehicles had already been coming up that road. People with cameras, tripods, and big promises. They said they were there to help. They said the world cared. They said they could finally give the Whittakers the life they deserved. Money started to pour in from strangers online. People who would never meet Betty sent donations because they felt moved by what they saw. They were told the funds would fix the home, put in proper plumbing, repair the roof, maybe even move the family into a safer place. To Betty, it sounded like a miracle after a lifetime of going without. There were names that kept coming up, people who stepped forward as protectors, who offered to handle the accounts, talk to the platforms, run the channels. They spoke the language Betty and Larry didn't: monetization, revenue, sponsorships, nonprofits. They said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything for you." All Betty heard was, "You're finally going to be okay." But as the months went by, the house didn't change the way she'd been led to believe it would. The septic system still failed. The bathroom still wasn't the kind of bathroom the state wanted to see. Promised repairs seemed to stall, then quietly vanish. The same old problems were still there, except now the family was famous, and everyone assumed the money had fixed it all. Then came something Betty never expected. Word that law enforcement was looking into where those donations actually went. An official fraud investigation. Allegations that large sums raised in the Whittaker name hadn't reached the Whittakers themselves. For people online, it was a headline. For Betty, it was a second betrayal layered on top of the first. She had opened her door, her life, and her family to people who said they were helping. Now, she sat in a house that still didn't meet the standards of the state, without the loved ones she'd cared for all her life, hearing that the money meant to protect them might have disappeared somewhere far beyond her holler. Chapter 5. Betty Now. loneliness, guilt, and feeling abandoned. The house hasn't changed much. The same thin walls, the same old couch, the same front porch where Betty used to watch Ray rock in his chair and listen for Timmy's footsteps. But now, when she looks around, it feels like the air itself is missing someone. The silence in those rooms is louder than any argument ever was. Mornings used to start with checking on everyone. Is Ray awake? Is Lorene warm enough? Did Timmy eat? Now Betty wakes up and has to remind herself there is no one left to go check on. She still moves through the house on instinct, pausing at doorways, glancing at empty beds, like her body hasn't caught up to what happened. Every empty pillow feels like a question she can't answer. What hurts most isn't just that they're gone. It's the way they were taken. She spent a lifetime believing that love was enough, that if she stayed, if she cooked, if she bathed them, if she kept them under her roof, they would be safe. When the state said her care wasn't good enough, it felt like someone stamped failure across all those years of sacrifice. In quiet moments, the thought gnaws at her. Did I do something wrong? Could I have cleaned more, fixed more, fought harder? The world saw a broken household. She saw the hundreds of invisible acts that kept 3 vulnerable people alive day after day. Now, she carries a guilt that no one meant to hand her, but she holds anyway. And then there's the fear. She doesn't know exactly what their days look like now. Who is feeding them? Who is calming them when they're scared? Who is explaining why she isn't there? She worries they might think she gave up on them, that she chose to stay behind. The thought that they could feel abandoned by her keeps her awake more than any storm beating against the roof. On top of that sits a heavier layer, the feeling of being left behind by everyone else. People came with cameras and promises. Money came and went. Investigations started. The internet had its say and moved on. But Betty is still here, in the same house, with the same memories, waiting for news that never quite answers the question she asks every single day. Will they ever come home? To the outside world, her story is complicated and debated. To her, it's painfully simple. She gave her life to caring for them, and now she is alone, trying to understand how everything she built could be taken away in a single season. Chapter 6. Where do we go from here? Dignity, responsibility, and respect. Some stories end with clear answers. Betty's doesn't. It sits in the space between what the state calls protection and what she feels is loss, between what outsiders promised and what they delivered. At the center of all of it is a 73-year-old woman on a West Virginia porch, trying to understand how a lifetime of caregiving turned into an empty house. Nothing we say here will bring Ray, Lorene, or Timmy back to that living room tonight. No video can fix the past, and no amount of anger online can rewind a single day of what has already happened. But there is something we can do. We can choose how we talk about this family, how we remember them, and how we respond when vulnerable people are turned into content. If you've watched this far, you've spent time with Betty's pain. The least we can do is refuse to turn it into a spectacle. Don't harass the people involved. Don't play detective with rumors. Ask harder questions of anyone who claims to help families like this, while controlling the money and the narrative. Betty's story is a reminder that behind every clip is a human being whose life continues after the views slow down. She may feel abandoned, but we don't have to abandon the responsibility to treat her and her family with the dignity they were always owed.